Believe it or not, this is the 100th video on my channel, and the fact that I can say that is already crazy. I've been doing this YouTube thing for almost 3 years now, and have created some videos I'm really proud of. One thing I didn't expect going into this, well, one of many things I didn't expect, was that this little kitty you see would ever be anything other than myself. I created Sunnyfall as a character just so she could represent me and be something I would both enjoy looking at and not mind drawing. Her prefix, Sunny, was one already attached to me for years, as it was a piece of one of my first usernames. I looked outside that day, the sun was shining, and forevermore, Sunny was one of the names I went by, especially in the last 7 years or so. Fall just came about because I was trying out various possible suffixes, and Sunnyfall just flowed nicely. It also lined up with the color palette I was already hoping for. Ginger, with some darker and lighter markings, since orange is really the only bright, vibrant color cats naturally come in, and I happen to like vibrant colors. But really, that's all she was to me. A design, taking into account pieces of myself and my preferences to make a cat who would represent me. It was a surprise then when several people over the years asked me what Sunnyfall's life was like, what she did for fun, who her family or friends were, and when and where she lived. I didn't have the answers to any of those questions, and usually made up something small on the spot. But today, I would like to change that. Today, I would like to tell you about Sunnyfall's life, separate from my own. Sunnykit was born into RiverClan many seasons after any of the current cats were alive. She was the only kit of Amberlight and Sootstone, a rarity for cats in general, but especially in the booming generation in which she found herself. After moons of peace, all 4 clans had flourished, and there were numerous new warriors in every clan. However, by happenstance, there were no kits or apprentices for Sunnykit to grow up with. The younger kits were born only a moon before she left the nursery, and the older apprentices had only a moon to share with her in the apprentice den before they were promoted. Sunnypaw grew up without any other friends her age, but that didn't mean she was alone. She loved spending time with her family and the other cats of the clan, especially the medicine cat, Heron Pelt. He was a very serious Tom, talented and alluring because of that talent, but rarely sparing a moment to speak to many other cats. As a kid, Sunnykit tried to spend as much time with him as she could, already enticed by the job of a medicine cat. But often, those attempts failed, as Heron Pelt was too busy. Instead, Sunnykit would spend time weaving reeds along the nursery wall to play games with her mother, or even set up an obstacle course for the two of them to run, just as practice. She'd also spend plenty of time with the elders, senior warriors, and her parents, just getting stories and advice from them whenever she could. She really looked up to all of them, and growing up without any siblings or other cats her age to play with, she matured quickly, skipping past and sometimes devaluing the more childish routines most cats had gone through. Her mother, Amberlight, decided to be a nursery aide by the time Sunnypaw became an apprentice. She had learned enough healing and passing to take care of the kits until they could see a medicine cat, and sometimes even taught others the basics. She was very kind, patient, and always loved to tell stories of the history of the clans. Though creating and solving puzzles and games was always her forte, she loved learning about and sharing how far the clans had come and thinking about the way things used to be. Her father, Sootstone, was a great warrior, dutiful and hardworking, and knew everything there was to know about different fish and which ones you could expect to see at different fishing spots at different times of year. One of his legs was limp, and the claws at the end of it couldn't expand, but that had never stopped him from being a great hunter, thanks to his unique techniques and absolute refusal to give up or treat himself as lesser. Sunnykit looked up to both of them, and enjoyed soaking up everything they, and the other warriors, knew. The one exception to this was her clan's fascination with decorating their dens. When she and her mom made games and obstacle courses for each other, that made sense, but what use was there in a pretty rock or a few extra feathers that could just prick you at night if you weren't careful? Why would any cat add two-leg rubbish to their dens just because it was shiny? Maybe she was just too different from them. That wasn't what either of her parents did, after all, and it wasn't what she would do either. Through her mom, she was introduced to Heron Pelt, and after many visits and a lot of pleading, became his apprentice when she left the nursery. She was pretty good at memorizing herbs and loved being able to help cats, but she got queasy around issues larger than a cold or a scratch and found out she herself was more susceptible to sickness than other cats, so she wasn't excelling in the way that her parents did in their careers. Moreover, she was a massive extrovert, and the lifestyle of a medicine cat turned out to be much more private than she had hoped. So, after 2 moons of training, she decided she wasn't cut out for the job, and, though it was difficult, became a warrior apprentice instead under Dawnstream. Like her mother, she kept her basic healing knowledge with her and was reassured by the fact that the things she had learned wouldn't go away. She would just have to find a different way to put them to use. Dawnstream cared a lot about organization, making sure every apprentice who she trained learned to keep track of their own time and tasks so they wouldn't always have to fall back on the deputy or their mentor to tell them where to be. Sunnypaw took to this particular task very well and ended up genuinely falling in love with the ability to sort through and plan her work, easing her worries as she could have it all laid out in front of her. They had their rough patches at times, but Dawnstream was overall a great mentor and influence on Sunnypaw, and she respected her mentor greatly, enough that by the end of her apprenticeship, she was certain she wanted to be a mentor herself. Badly. She never got as much into fishing as her dad did, though she tried to, but she did love eating different types of fish and learning to discuss the different flavor profiles. One of her favorite fish is salmon, though of course it and its distinctive flavor doesn't come around as often, so she would also happily take some chub, trout, or carp. She'll even take a mouse or a vole on occasion, though she doesn't eat squirrels. According to her, they're too cute to kill. Plus, they end up making trees when they bury all those nuts, and Sunnypaw loves trees, so really, she's just protecting the lake by not eating squirrels. Even loving Dawnstream in her training, though, Sunnypaw always mildly hated fight training. Swimming was great, and the times when they learned RiverClan's special suite of moves was fun, thanks to just being in the water. But on land, she wasn't very agile or coordinated, and didn't love hurting cats in the first place. It turned out, though, that she did have a lot of raw strength and some sizable reflexes, which let her get by. If she could get someone into a pin, it was unlikely they would ever be able to get up, so she made do in training, even without enjoying it. Actual battles, though, still get her heart racing to this day. She ended up loving swimming, a lot more than she expected to. The water enveloped her in a quiet, cool, peaceful cocoon, and whenever she was there, she had an excuse to not consider her dozens of plans and tasks, or the hunting she had to do for the clan. She never stayed long, not wanting to shirk her duties, of course, but it did feel nice. When she finally did become a warrior, Sunnyfall, she eased quickly into the daily routine of patrolling and hunting thanks to Dawnstream's values, but did find it more difficult to fit in with her, now, peers. The other young warriors having grown up together, or at least getting to know what other young cats were like, gave them a very different perspective, and sometimes it felt like they lived on different planets. Still, she wanted to get to know them regardless. Being without any friends was a quick way to deplete any energy or happiness she had, and she knew she couldn't really be a part of the clan if she didn't interact with it. It took a while, but with her parents' and mentors' support, she stuck it out until she had made a few friends among the warriors in the generation above hers, including another she-cat who deeply wanted to be a mentor, Flashtrail. Together, they spoke with more experienced mentors, sat in on training sessions, even ventured to the other clans to learn everything they could about teaching the new warriors of their clans. Of course, Flashtrail was several moons older than Sunnyfall, and neither of them were as old as the most seasoned mentors they spoke with, but they already knew this was their passion, and they would work to make themselves the best mentors they could be. A couple of seasons later, they were ready, and Sunnyfall and Flashtrail were both made mentors, to Aspenpaw and Duckpaw respectively. They moved their nests next to each other in the warrior's den, and from then on, they were the greatest of friends, rarely going a day without talking and coming to see each other whenever they had questions to consider about how best to train their apprentices. Friendship didn't only exist in RiverClan for Sunnyfall, though. During her moons of being the only apprentice in her clan, and before she made friends with Flashtrail, Sunnyfall got to know several cats from other clans at gatherings and border meetings, and although they couldn't see each other every day, they met regularly enough that Sunnyfall was ready to consider many of them her closest friends. Some of them introduced her to storytelling, weaving elaborate tales that took elements of the clan's history and spiced them up with more intrigue or more relationships that no cat was really sure existed at the time. Others introduced her to art, decorating their dens even outside RiverClan, and even carving delicate designs in the dirt floors to make artistic pathways or demonstrations of the stories others would tell. Though she didn't quite have the passion for it that her friends did, Sunnyfall grew interested in trying out this craft as well in order to accompany her stories. A couple of friends were even just as interested in history as Abril was, and would talk with her for entire nights about the possible motivations and conflicting accounts of the cats long gone. They brought Sunnyfall back into a passion for clan history that she had almost left behind as an apprentice. Soon enough, Sunnyfall had become a sort of historian herself, telling stories to the kits and apprentices of the clan's history and using her carvings and decorations to accent the tales and keep the young cat's attention. She even started something relatively new, analyzing the history for signs of where cats went wrong, what lessons could be drawn from their lives, and how the clans could improve upon them in their current world. After a while, even some of the older cats and cats from other clans would come to see these sessions, more than she could have imagined. This is just the in-universe explanation of my YouTube channel, by the way. This is what Sunnyfall is doing when you see her in videos. Her favorite historical figure is, of course, Hollyleaf, though she also has a fondness for Thornclaw and Brightheart, Ivypool and Dovewing, Briarlight, Bluestar, and much further back, Tallshadow, Greywing, and Halfmoon. These days, she splits her time about equally between studying history and mentoring Aspenpaw, along with, hopefully, the many more apprentices she will get to train in the future. It's certainly a lot of work, sometimes more than she bargained for, but she wouldn't have it any other way. Now she gets to do everything she loves and lives a balanced life of work, hobbies, and relationships. That balance does get a bit tenuous at times, but it's why she wanted so much variety in her life. It's easy to get burned out on the daily cycle of clan life when all you have is patrols and mealtimes. Her life is full, but it's rewarding, and for now, she couldn't be happier with it. At Flash Trail's encouragement, she has even learned to, at least sometimes, spare a moment to take a break floating in the river to truly clear her mind for a while. She is doing well, I can say that much. And that is the story of Sunnyfall, as much as I have for now, anyway. I don't know that any of this will factor into, well, anything in the future, considering the words coming from this kitty will still just be what I want to say to you, but I hope it was entertaining at least. And thank you for sticking with me through all 100 of these videos. Gosh, that is still hard to believe. Thank you for watching, and always remember that any resemblance between Sunnyfall's life and mine is purely purposeful, but they're still very much not the same thing, in case you were wondering.